Welcome back, City Builders. I'm Canadian Moose, and today I'm going to show you how I fill in detail weird angles, add some bike lanes, and introduce all of you to the public market square. This is Moose Harbour. Stopping at the Inspiration Station, we are headed to North Vancouver and Esplanade Ave. The inspiration comes from the old bike lanes, and in present day, they have cleaned this street up, making it a far safer street for all forms of transport. Unfortunately, Moose Harbour won't be getting this treatment, and I will be drawing inspiration from the old layout. Next, we are headed over to Seattle and Pike Place Market. While I won't be coming close to this scale today, inspiration will be taken from the public market signs and the history of the area. Let's take the CN freight train back to Moose Harbour for today's build. Just hopping in here real quickly, I wanted to show off a mod that's been added to the mod list on the Discord, as well as to this series, and that is the Realistic Trips mod. So this mod has a whole ton of settings that you can sort of tailor make to your experience. I started it off by selecting the Canadian option for it. And what this mod does is it allows you more control over realistic trips, as the mod says, but realistic sort of day and night activities of the citizens and the traffic in your city. So you can come through here and sort of set different values for work. So I went with the classic 9 to 5, so you can set work day shift start time, work day shift end time, and of course those values will result in more people heading to work around 9 a.m., more people leaving work at 5 p.m., thus your streets are more congested around 9 a.m. and more congested around 5 p.m. to add to the realistic look of the simulation through the game. So there's tons of settings that you can set throughout. You've also got shopping and leisure options. You've got your school option, which I think is really cool. So school vacation is set on. So from July to August, kids won't be in school. It's summer vacay. And then you can set when elementary starts, when high school starts, when university starts, and when they all end. And it even goes as deep as to how many schools are attending, or students, are attending a class during the days of the week. So Monday to Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, which is really, really cool to see. Yeah, so tons of settings that you can go through and mess with. Mine I kept pretty much basic. I tweaked a little bit around school just to match some of the times, at least from what it was like when I went to school. And then they also have special events, which is really cool. So you can set the minimum number of events and the maximum number of events for any given day, which again will just help simulate that sort of realistic activity throughout your city. So fantastic mod. Honestly, with the amount of options that you have in there, and if you're really craving a realistic simulation, definitely this is a quality of life mod amongst many others. I highly, highly recommend this mod. It's really cool. So yeah, just want to touch on that and share that mod's been added officially to the mod list for this series, and will sort of impact the stuff that you see throughout it. And it also goes into the question of this video of if you'd ever be interested in me doing a video or shooting footage where day-night cycles on, because I think when we do turn day-night cycle on, so you see it go from day to nighttime, the sun's up doing its thing instead of just constantly shooting the footage at a set value, it ties in very nicely with this mod. And so when it starts to get dark in game, you'll see people heading home and streets getting busier. And of course, when it's midnight out, there's nobody out and about roaming through the streets as much. So yeah, I just want to show that off. Kickstarting the time lapse here with everybody's favorite, the most iconic North American surface parking lot here. So we're using Dome's incredible assets to create it. And this is honestly probably my best advice if somebody ever has the question of how do I fill these weird angles, these sort of weird shapes in my city, these empty spaces that, maybe don't necessarily fit a building the best. And especially if you're building a North American city, I'm not sure that it relates to European, but I can touch on, North American since we're building a Canadian city here, is fill it in with parking. It's just honestly, like if you look at any of your cities on Google Maps or check out the places, hell, even probably the cities that you live in, a lot of these empty spaces or weird angles like this, best built with a surface parking, especially because using Dome's parking lot assets here, you can sort of make it fit any shape that you want. And there's also network parking that you can use too to really make it fit that space. Once you've laid it out with the assets, it's time to come in with an asphalt surface. You can also use decals, but I went with a surface for this one because I'm going to cover it in stained decals and worn decals. So we're going to cover this whole spot with a surface. And once the surface has been added, I like to come in with the invisible roads here. And you want to make sure it connects, as you can see there, to the green spaces. It provides the best realistic look when it snaps directly to those green spaces. And the reason why we're using this, because obviously you'd be like, well, cars are still parking there. But they park very weird if you don't have these invisible roads here to sort of dictate which way they drive. They kind of just go all willy-nilly, so you can use these invisible roads to sort of dictate which way you want the cars to go and give it a little bit more of a realistic feel to your parking lots.
Justify yourself. It's for the justify yourself.
Was all the music he ever...
And now it's time to add some of the decorations. So you saw us adding the parking lot sign to the front of the parking lot, and then coming in with the double street light here and some decals, and using the decals to denote where the no parking spots would be for this parking lot. And then I saw this awesome ATM asset, and to me, yes, it says ATM on it, but we're just going to ignore that. It looks like the perfect pay station asset, and I figured we got to have a little area here with a pay station for it, despite the fact that we don't have the props for it. And I kind of wanted to figure out how can I make it look even more realistic instead of just adding the ATM assets. We don't really have a sign that says, you know, pay here or here's the pay station. So I figured, what if I come in with some decals and just layer them onto the ground just to give it that little pop of realism. And then gotta have a big, bulky billboard. Usually multiple, and this time we're just going to go with just the one, but gotta have a big, bulky billboard somewhere. Now, the unfortunate thing with the billboard assets is they don't have a lot of height to them. They're sort of meant to be, and the way that they're used, or Colossal Order uses them on their vanilla assets, is on the tops of buildings. So I use these log props, and I'm going to color them completely black since silver kind of showed a little bit too much of the wood color there. I mean, I guess you could argue that you could maybe just keep it wood, but the rest of the sign is sort of metal and steel. So I thought that this looks a lot better going with the all black color. It also kind of matches, as you can see there, the black of the actual billboard. So we go ahead and sink these in to give a little bit of height to the billboard. And it ends up looking really, really cool. And honestly, despite the fact that you can still kind of see, you know, a little bit, if you stare at it too much, you can still see kind of that wooden texture. This just gives it enough of a realistic look to it from distance here. Like, look at that. I think that looks awesome. And then we got to come in with that area there, because how am I going to fill the rest of that space? Well, it's a surface parking lot. It made sense to cover the whole area in foliage. So I take the little green bush, sink it in at about minus 0.9 to minus 1, and just spam it everywhere. Now, I'm lucky that my computer can handle it. I don't have a crazy beefy computer, but it can handle that bush, because that bush is essentially a tree. It can handle it being spammed everywhere. So just, you know, go slow with it. See how your computer handles it if you want to use that method for realistic foliage. Just use it sparingly, if you will. And then, of course, add in some surfaces there. So a manicured grass look here, and then add in some flowers to the little spots there, just to give it a little bit of pop of color. And then coming in with some of the planters to, again, block off areas where we don't want the cars coming through. And I wanted to mix it up from just using the barricades. As you can see me here using the barricades. So I used planters on the areas where pedestrians would walk through. And then in an area like this near the Boston Pizza, that's going to be heavy car traffic on both sides, made more sense to use the barricade there. And now we're coming in with the invisible pedestrian path. And the goal with this is to make the pedestrian path fit through as best as I can. Make it so that they walk through the gaps in the planters as opposed to just walking through the planters. So I'm going to try my best to line it up there, and I think I did a pretty good job. I think some cinematics at the end of the video today show off people walking around that area, and it looks pretty good. There's still some that kind of get a little bit too close, but for how limiting the space is there, I think I did a pretty good job. Let's go ahead and add some more barriers to the edge of this parking lot. And then some more foliage, so using this yellow flower bush as sort of dandelions there that you can just spam all over. And then the birch tree, use the sapling, sink it in at -4.5 to give that overgrown weeds look to the base of like lampposts and pillars. And then using some more of the dead flower bushes, using the dead version like the oak tree here, just gives it that sort of dead, dry overgrowth that you'd see in an empty area like this. And that oak tree just gives the perfect sort of like branches and I guess just like branches and dry look to it. It looks fantastic, especially when you use it at the base of things, like the base of that billboard there. And then using some more dead flowers just to give the area a nice texture. Now, I kind of thought that there would be a chain link fence separating this parking lot from what will be the big, nice base of the tower. And I'm coming in and using it because it does have a net lane version. I'm using the props individually instead of the network fence. And the reason why is it gives me more control to create a realistic fence using the miniature PO here. I can sink in and push over some pieces of the fence to just give it that look of like a worn old fence that's been here for a while. You know, maybe people have pushed up against it, a car bumped it, whatever it is, whatever the story of it is. But it adds character to an area that would have just been, here's just a fence, you know what I mean? This at least tells a little bit of a story and just adds that character to the build that I love creating these little areas. Yes, it's time consuming. Yes, it's tedious. Yes, it's just visuals. But, you know, what is a city without some beautiful, realistic visuals? And as you can see here, like, look at how much flavor that adds and history. Like, it's telling a story, you know, instead of just plonking down a network fence there. And then I figured we got to add some graffiti to the pay station here. And then it's time to decorate or finish decorating the parking lot with some decals. So I start off with the Broman stained surfaces. They're probably my favorite, especially when you sink it in. So I'll spam them down, sink them in as best as I can, just to give it that subtle hint of wear without it being covered in dirt. And the key to it is sort of layering surface or layering decals. So I start with the Broman decals, but then I'm going to come in and use some of the static noise decals, like this dirt one here. And it's just all this layering, because we can layer decals so effortlessly in Cities 2 without them fighting each other as badly as they did in Cities 1. It allows for these really cool, unique areas where you can just spam down a lot of decals to capture that full, worn, and aged look to it. So using the cracked decals on the side here and adding some more stains to the parking lot. And then it's time to add the realistic curb cutout and the entrance and exit for the parking lot.
Every part of our lives.
And then the decal is a bit different than the surface, than the vanilla asphalt surface. So I was struggling a bit on how I can bridge that transition. And so I figured, let's use this great net lane here to help sort of gap that transition in a more realistic way. Basically trying to blend the two different looking asphalt textures there. And then from Hobble's fantastic Canadian pack, we've got an awesome little TELUS advert there. And I kind of figured for that billboard, you gotta have some graffiti, some kids snuck up there and tagged over it. And then what would a surface parking lot be in Canada if it wasn't covered in trash?
Let's first learn how sounds are produced on conventional musical instruments.
And then figured down by the base of the billboard there, let's add a homeless encampment. And then we've got the, gotta have it because of the Pacific Northwest. We gotta have the, you know, in this case it would be probably like, what, Vancouver, or I guess Moose Harbour PD. Could also be RCMP, but with a livery like that, gotta have the Moose Harbour PD rolling up and harassing the homeless people there. And I figured, you know, we don't have cops there, so I could just have the car here, but I wanted, you know, the officers getting out of the vehicle. So I figured I'd go with the, it's kind of ironic, but I'd go with the homeless citizen version because they look the most like undercover officers would look like pulling up, despite the fact that it's a, you know, undercover officers rolling up in a marked police car there. And then adding some shopping carts and the homeless citizens there. And just little scenes like this really help a build come to life. And yeah, check it out. They're a lot of fun to build. So I upgraded those two one-ways to be 3-lane one-ways, and the reason why is because we're going to use lane traffic, or lane controller here, part of the traffic mod, to remove cars from certain lanes on the right-hand side of both one-ways. And the reason why is we're going to create our first bike lanes in the city. It's a Pacific Northwest build. You gotta have bike infrastructure, and a lot of it, and high-quality bike infrastructure, even though Colossal Order still hasn't given us bikes in what they deem the most realistic city builder of all time. But we still don't have bikes, you know, almost 2 years on. So if they're not going to give us bikes, I'll at least make my own bike infrastructure for the sake of realism. So I'm going to come in here and use one of the grass surfaces from the static noise pack. And this is to add some grass-lined medians here that we're going to put a spruce tree on for that really quintessential Pacific Northwest avenue. And now I'm going to use what's new to me, or newish. I think it came out recently, the G87 chevrons. And the way that I go about using these, and I think this is the way it was intended. I'll be honest, I haven't fully read the description of them. I just saw it. It looked hot, so I instantly subscribed to it. And what we're going to do is line it up as best we can in the middle of our median there. And then we're going to blend the edges that stick out here using the G87 asphalt decals. And now it's time to start adding some bus stops, and later on you'll see me add a metro stop. Now, we're not going to go ahead and add the lines yet, but I wanted to lay down the infrastructure for it so that when the city reaches that state where, okay, it's big enough, it's time to start adding buses, and it's time to start adding metro, that the infrastructure has already been laid down, and we can go ahead and add those lines without having to retrofit any of the streets for that infrastructure. We built the city with that infrastructure in mind. And here I'm just doing the same thing. So this road here is going to be the hub of our bike lanes, where our main bike lanes start. So I'm adjusting the road and the lanes coming in to that avenue that has the tree-lined street there. so that the cars don't use the lanes that will be for bikes, which will be on the left and right side there. So just using the traffic mod and its lane controller option to clean up the road and allow it for decorative bike lanes, but just so that the cars aren't constantly driving through it. Now, the one thing I will say about the bike lanes here is that as cool as they look, decorative adds a nice flavor to it. When using the traffic mod, vehicles, as you can see, like taxis, so service vehicles, taxis, ambulances, police cars, and fire trucks, garbage trucks as well, I think, probably postal as well, can still drive through lanes even if you tell them not to. Service vehicles are exempt to the traffic mod, it seems. So anything you do in traffic mod, the vehicles that are, so any vehicle that identifies as a service vehicle will disregard it. We're using the British net lane pack from G87 because it has this really nice perforated line here that is a little bit more chunky and looks a lot more like the bike lanes that you'd find in Vancouver, and actually that you'd find in the Netherlands as well too, because the Netherlands and Vancouver have almost identical bike lane markings, which I always thought was really cool. But yeah, we're gonna go in here and create the city's first bike street. And so this whole bike area here and with the bus stops, this was all inspired by the North Vancouver segment of the Inspiration Station. So it's not a perfect, great bike, bike lane, but it is a realistic one that is inspired by the old infrastructure of North Vancouver. And so you'll see me come in here with more of those G87 asphalt decals, and that's to cover up the pre-existing lines on the road so that we can use our own dotted lines for the area where people can drive over the bike road. So in this case, the buses, and then some bike lane or bike decals to really sell the whole look of the area. And once that's done, you've laid down all the net lanes, it's time to color the areas where cars and buses will be driving over the bike lanes, just to give it that little pop of color. And then I'm coming in here and just cleaning up some of the decals there a bit because they go over the surface. So I want to adjust them just a little bit there so they're enough to cover the pre-existing lines, but they don't go over the surface. So right there, we're just going to line it up as best as we can to the edge there, so they cover up those pre-existing road lines without covering up the surface. And then I love doing this, so I know a lot of people have always said it, Moose, you can just delete those markings with Better Bulldozer. Unfortunately for me, I don't know what's going on with it. I've reached out to Yen, but they have no fix for it, unfortunately. When using Better Bulldozer for me currently, it's broken. Anything I delete with Better Bulldozer just comes back on the next load. Super unfortunate because it is a must-have mod. So instead of that, I'm going to use, what's a creative way that we can come up and cover it. And I've been doing this for a while, is patches to sort of cover it there. And then another cool thing that I found out here is I'm using a static noise stain decal for the roads to add a little bit more texture to it. But you can also use G87's asphalt decals that you've seen me use throughout this episode. And when placed on top of a decal, because of how the layering works, it creates the look of worn patches, which is really cool because the G87 decal goes on top of the stain decal. So you can create this look of really worn patchwork that you would see on roads for that extra level of realism. And then we got to add some adverts and detail up the bus stop. So we got a Tim Hortons advert, some graffiti on the side, and some trash for that realistic Pacific Northwest bus stop. And now it's time for what is my favorite build of today's episode. And the final build of today's episode, that is the Public Market Square. And while it's much, much smaller and has direct metro connection, the whole inspiration for this really comes from Pike Place in Seattle there. especially with like the whole public market square, and you can recolor it too. So when we're able to recolor it to red for the lettering, which is so cool, a massive shout out. I don't know if they intended this, but let's assume that they intended this. A massive shout out to the creators behind the Northeast pack. I gotta assume that they intended it to be colored because it's just, oh man, it allows it just by changing the coloring to red instead of the white. Instantly makes it feel like something that you would see in Portland, in Seattle, in Vancouver. So cool. And then I wanted to tell the rail history of this area. So we're going to convert the track down to single track and put in an old, although it's a fairly modern engine, but what we can call an older historic engine here. And the idea behind this track is that it terminated at the building behind you and maybe was dropping off goods here, or maybe there was a roundhouse building that used to be here. And this is inspired by the Yaletown Roundhouse location in Vancouver that has a very old engine still on display, lots of tracks, and pays homage to its history there. And then we come in with the Tiny Parks, awesome addition by Colossal Order when they added those Tiny Parks. And we're going to remove the surface so that we can add our own brick surface to sort of tie into, because this whole area that we've been working on where the surface parking lot was, where the buildings were from last episode, is an area that was draws a lot from the history of Yaletown in Vancouver, and it was all this old industrial area. The whole space would have been industrial, from wharfs all the way to lots of rail history there as well. And so I wanted to tell that history even in the surfaces that we use, of using this like older brick surface around what is a much older building in the Public Market Square building, and you've got this rail history that you're showing off, you know, preserving the old tracks that maybe used to be there and the old engine. So why not use a older brick surface to really tell the history of the area? With the surface added, we're going to come in and mark it off, just add a little bit of touch. I've just never been a fan of how the surfaces just end and then there's just grass. So, thanks to, you guessed it, G87, we have beautiful curb net lanes that we can use to trim up the whole area and give it a realistic edge trim. And now it's time to start laying down the infrastructure for the Metro. So Metro's going to play a big role in the city. It'll be underground in the downtown, but it will become above ground, and it's going to draw a ton of inspiration from the SkyTrain lines in Vancouver and the Canada line in Vancouver. Now we're going to sink in the bush for the classic foliage detailing. And my God, I cut out so much footage here so I didn't bore you guys. It took forever. Like, took me like 45 minutes to detail up all the bushes. Like, look at how much space we filled there. It took so long to build this spot out. I was going crazy. It took a lot. Also, a keen listener or keen viewer, I don't know what the term is. Anyways, somebody watching this episode might have noticed we've added back the audio, the game audio. I definitely felt like it was missing. So you'll hear it. It's like a subtle background noise alongside the music. We have in-game audio added back, and I'm really pleased with it. I think it does add a little bit of flavor to it. You get this sort of like background ambience, alongside the music, which I think is really cool. So here is, alongside my favorite build, the Public Market Square. This is inspired by the Trans Am Totem in Vancouver. I'm so stoked that I was able to recreate this. It's really sad. They took it down, and I believe it's still in Burnaby, but not on display currently. But yeah, it's basically was a bunch of cars put on as what they called the Trans Am Totem in Vancouver, and it was right by the elevated SkyTrain. So when you would come in on the SkyTrain line, leaving Main Street Science World Station, it would take you past this totem, and I always thought it was just so cool and so weird and quirky and added to that weirdness of Vancouver. It was such a shame that they took it down, so I wanted to preserve that history of it, and we gotta have it here in Moose Harbour. So now it's time to add some of the final pieces of foliage detailing to the Public Market Square. So I'm gonna finish getting the Public Market Square here detailed up, layering lots of foliage, and I'll connect with you all in the live play segment of this episode. So here we are hanging out next to the public market square, taking in the beautiful view. And this is the live play segment where I'm going to show you around the build that we did today a little bit more in depth, just so you get an idea of what it looks like in real time here. So here is the public market square building. One of my favorite assets out of the Northeast pack, especially with the lettering on there. And then I didn't realize, and I need to experiment with this on more buildings, is there's multiple color meshes that you can mess with. And we got so lucky that one of the meshes here was the lettering, and so we can actually change the coloring of that. So if you place this asset in your build it, you can do whatever color you want. I went with the red because it just pulls out that very like almost like Pike's Place, I think it's called Pike's Market, Pike's Place, the little market in Seattle. It's been a while since I got out there, but that's what that was kind of reminding me of, and that's what this asset's always reminded me of, an asset that would exist down over there. So I went with that vibe here, and I think it turned out really well. And then, of course, access to the metro, and once we get that up and running, which I almost was tempted to with this episode, but it would just be 2 stops, and people wouldn't really be encouraged to use it. So similar to the bus stops that we did over here, we're going to place them down so that the infrastructure's there when the city is big enough to warrant us adding bus lines and eventually a metro line. But we'll have the infrastructure laid down so that it exists, that when we go in to make our lines, we don't have to retrofit any of this over top of the build or make changes. It's already there ready for us to go, so we can get those lines up and running. Definitely didn't make a ton of progress, but I think today's episode, and this kind of goes back to the whole series as a whole for this project, it's not about how much we progress, it's about the quality. So it's very much so that mentality of quality over quantity. I don't care if we do 1 block here, or I guess a block and a half maybe with the parking lot, as long as the quality is something that I'm proud to put my name on and share with all of you, which I'm very stoked on for this build. So expect slow progress. This is not going to be a massive city in 5-6 episodes. You know, this is a build where we spend probably 30 episodes on the downtown and go from there, you know. But I'm pleased with it because we will fly back, you know, and even now with how much we've progressed already in the few episodes that we've been in, this is to a level that I'm really stoked on. I want this to be one of the most detailed series out there for City Skylines 2, and when people think of detailed series, they talk about detailed series out there, that this project comes to mind. Really stoked on this, and the whole project just hits close to home, being raised my entire life in British Columbia, born in Vancouver, raised in Kamloops, and now back living in Vancouver, that this really hits close to home, and it allows me a lot of creative freedom to build the stuff that's familiar to me and have fun with it, put my spin on it while making it feel like the Pacific Northwest. I think we did a good job with all the foliage here, and you see lots of people walking around using it as well, like using our little invisible pathways that we put through here. But then this functions as a park, so people will come here to use the park. It benefits the city because it acts as a park, while incorporating with this awesome little locomotive that's available for the public to check out. Really wish that Better Bulldozer could delete this stuff. I think it can delete the poles, but not the cables. So it's so close. Would love to be able to get rid of those cables, but for now it is what it is. And it's unfortunate I can't color the little bumper that it comes with. I'd love to be able to color that yellow for the more North American style. Here's some of the little bus cutouts inspired by North Vancouver. Old North Vancouver, because the area that it's inspired by has changed it and made it much safer. I just don't have the ability to fully pull it off yet in-game, but we're getting close. And then, yeah, the little detailing here of the bus stop, which I just think gives it that extra little pop instead of just placing the bus stops down. But that's the level of detail that we're going to do over the whole build, and at some point we are going to come. I was not ready to do it today, but at some point we're going to come and, you know, build out this the tower and properly detail around it. Although, again, a lot of the assets come very detailed. It's not a lot of stuff that I need to do as much. Again, come in and grime it up a bit is really the main thing that we'll be doing. And then here's the little scene with the since we don't have police guys, I kind of thought, or police officers, I kind of thought, okay, these will just be 2 undercovers in their little Ford Taurus coming to harass the homeless people, as is case, yeah, you know. And the detailed telesign here with the graffiti on it. Thought that was a really, really nice addition there. And huge shout out to Hobble's pack once again. That'll really tie this whole series together and give it that Canadian flair and really show like, hey, yeah, we're in Pacific Northwest on the Canadian side of the border, and here's kind of the things that I see when I'm out and about in the city that I live in. Really pleased with how the parking lot turned out, and these decals. It's a lot of work, a lot of layering of the decals, but it's so worth it to put in that extra time. And I'm really stoked at how this spot turned out. The little pay here booth, I think that turned out beautifully and just adds that little, you know, touch of realism that you'd see there. Just ignore the fact that it says bank ATM. That's maybe in another life they were bank ATMs, but not so much anymore. So and then yeah, the road, right? The road that we detailed up there with the grass median and the trees, and the decals and all the patchwork on there to really make it come to life. Over here, it's a little bit repetitive. The decals, if you stare at it enough, you're like, oh yeah, that's kind of a repetitive decal. I'm going to see if there's anything I can do to help make that appear less repetitive. And then we have the totem, the Trans Am totem. Long live, rest in peace. I believe it's still around in Burnaby somewhere. Not on display, but they do have it, and they do plan to relocate it. I don't know why they got rid of it. It was an awesome spot. You'd like see it when you're going on the metro. You would ride right past it. It was one of like those things that I noticed when I first moved down here. I was taking the metro to work all the time, the SkyTrain. Riding it past us, I was like, what the heck is that thing? And encouraged me to go and check it out. But yeah, long live the Trans Am totem. So we got our own in this build, and it looks really, really cool too. If you're driving along here, right? You're coming along, driving, you just see that the Public Market Square building. You've got the big tower on your side there. Yeah, that's super cool. So that really, really ties it together. But yeah, this was the build. The Public Market Square, the old rail history. And again, I think too with the history of the rail here, because you know this building would have been around at the time that the rail was there. They would have gone hand in hand. Is that this would have been like a terminus rail junction here, and so they preserved the tracks, just make it a nice little park. And you can see here what I think is really cool. So you can kind of see where the tracks maybe used to go. Like this probably wasn't always a road, and maybe the tracks used to follow it, because if you look down, you have this view corridor leading straight to the harbor, and you can see the port crane there. So you could assume that the trains, you know, maybe there's a terminus here, and they would go there and interact with the harbor, which I think is really cool to show that. Like these little view corridors we're going to get, and we're starting to slowly build up the skyline. It's going to be a bit of a big skyline. I want to blend Vancouver, Portland, and Seattle elements to the skyline. So it's definitely going to be a bigger one, biggest one on the channel for sure. Especially we got, you know, this big tower that we want to build up around. But still starting small, and I want to build up that density to it. And I think like there's an option here, if we do this right, to get a really cool view of the Public Market Square sign with this awesome, you know, built-in backdrop, a blend of glass and brick. I think next episode, because we've got a decent amount done here, I think next episode we're going to tackle Chinatown. So I want Chinatown to be this whole block here. So I think that'll be the plan. We'll see what actually happens if I get it done and how much of it I get done. But I think, yeah, let's aim for that. Let's do, because I think this will really fill out a big chunk if we can get Chinatown completed up, or at least the bones of it set in place. I don't know how much we'll get done of it, looking at how much we got done in this episode. But yeah, that'll be the plan. Yeah, so this was the live play. Let's head to the outro, cinematics.
Ah, Coach. So that's what keeps you on your toes.
Could be.